Today I want to take a few minutes and talk about a few terms that are associated with school finance. Now, when you talk about school finance, you generally think of the school's budget. If you're a teacher, for the most part, you really are not that concerned with the budget. You simply put in a request and somehow magically things happen. But if you are the head of the school, you're the principal, you're responsible for the financial stability of your institution. Now, what makes up the financial stability, if you will, of an organization? Well, it starts with the first thing, which is your assets. What does the school own? Now, for some people, that can be a simple thing. Some people would think, well, we own the school building and that's it. But you need to look much closer, because when you look at assets, it's everything that is owned by the school. Now, breaking that down, it means the school building, that means your parking lot, that means your lights. That means inside your school building, that means all your teacher desks. It means all of your student desks. It means all of your video equipment, all of your computers, all of your paper. Everything that you own as a school is an asset. Why is it considered an asset? It's because you have paid for that particular item. And as a result, you own it. The same way in your own household. You own certain things. When you get your insurance policy for your house, it's not just for the house itself, the structure. It's for the content. You'll see a little rider in your insurance policy that says the contents, and you pay a certain amount depending on the value of that content. If you have high-end artwork, you're going to be paying a lot more. The same with a school. As we all get more technology in our schools, one of the things that we realize is that that is a major asset. Now, in terms of liabilities, well, the liability is, what do we owe? It's very simple. What do we owe? If we closed our doors today, what would we owe people? Well, that might mean that we owe last month's heating bill or water bill. Or it might mean that we owe teachers, because most teachers are not given their entire salary over a 10-month period. It's stretched out over a 12-month period. Now, the reality is anything that you have not paid for must be considered a liability. So if you have a debt on your property or on your building, that's a liability. If you owe the bank $5,000, that's a liability. Because at the end of the day, if you closed up shop tomorrow, could you pay for all of your liabilities if you sold all of your assets? Now, again, that's a very simplistic explanation. So an asset is anything that you own, or money that you might have in a bank, or money that you might have in some kind of an endowment program. Those are considered assets. A liability, anything that you have not paid for at this particular moment in time. It's very simple. Why is that important? Because in order to have a financially stable school, you need to make sure that you are able to pay for the liabilities, that you have a plan of action. Why do schools wind up closing? It's because their liabilities far exceed their assets. Now, when we talk about assets, one of the assets that you also might never really consider is called accounts receivable. What is owed to you? Now, in a private school setting, that would simply mean that uncollected tuition. That's a receivable. If you have monthly payment plans, you're not getting all that money up front. So as a result, what you need to do is make sure that you have an accounts receivable, meaning that you know that the money is owed to you and you have a plan of action for when you will receive that money. Now, this is a real challenge for private schools because in many cases, schools overcommit to financial aid, and as a result, what happens is their accounts receivables far exceed what they've allocated in financial aid. Therefore, they have to start looking around for, will we ever get paid? How can we get paid? What will we do to someone who does not pay their bills? The accounts receivable. It's really important for you to keep a handle on that in the private schools. Why? Because again, if your accounts receivable suddenly start adding up and you start looking at your assets and your liabilities, you won't be able to pay your bills. That's the bottom line. So you need to make sure that you're always on top of the accounts receivable. Now, oftentimes you hear in school settings something called the income statement in our private schools. Now, that's a little bit different from the generally accepted accounting. Why? We've kind of simplified it. We've just said it's an income statement. In a business setting, it would be called the profit and loss statement, the P&L. Now, why is that important? Well, because you, as an administrator, need to make sure that on any given day, you should be able to know where you stand financially. If you answer to a board, you need to make sure that you can hand them a statement of what income you have, what income you expect, and also what bills are still outstanding. How much of your budget have you spent at this point? The income statement really tells you that. It tells you what you've spent on any given day. So when we talk about an income statement, it's really the profit and loss. Why is that important? Because especially at the end of the school year, if you suddenly find yourself, as you look at your income statement, with a loss, you're in deficit. And the reality is, what can you do to pay those bills? Because I know people like us, but the reality is you need to be able to pay your bills. If you cannot pay your bills, you will not be able to stay in business. It's very, very important. Now, another term that we use is called cash flow. Now, again, as the head of a school, you say, well, why do I need to worry about that? That's the business manager's responsibility. Well, the reality is it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility because at the end of the day, people will look to you as the head of the institution to ensure the financial stability of your institution. So, what is a cash flow statement? Well, a cash flow statement basically says, okay, let's scrape away everything else. What do we have in the bank at this given moment? What are all the assets that we have? What's the available cash that we have? You look at all those things. So, for instance, if it's the first month of school, your cash flow is probably pretty good. Why? Because you've gotten your first influx of tuition. Now, as the year goes on, and again, in some cases, people fail to pay their tuition, or tuition doesn't come in quite as fast, your cash flow suddenly diminishes. Again, why is that important? Because you need to make sure that you know exactly how much money you have in the bank. Why is that important? Because you need to know whether you can pay your bills or not, whether you can pay your teachers' salaries. Can you pay for the health care that you promised? Can you put the required amount of money aside for the retirement program that you promised? That's why a cash flow statement is critical. Too often people kind of overlook that and go, well, we'll deal with that later. The reality is you need to make sure that you know the amount of cash that is available throughout the year. You can do cash flow projections. And this is where the financial planning part of your responsibility comes in. How much money do you expect coming in the month of September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, and June? For most schools, the leanest month is July. Why? Because you don't have any tuition money coming in. In August, about midway through, you'll start to get tuition coming in. Now, again, cash flow is important because even during the summer, you'll still be paying your teachers. Where will you get that money? You don't have any income from tuition coming into your bank. So the reality is looking at your cash flow, the money that you expect. Now, again, when you look at cash flow, one of the things that you also need to look at is if you're having particular fundraising activity. If you have an annual fund, when will that money be coming in? In most cases, people have an annual fund in the fall. Why do they have it in the fall? Very simple, because you want to try to get that money early on. If you wait to have an annual fund appeal in the spring, by the time those dollars come in, you really won't be able to spend it that year. So you need to take a look at where you will be getting your money during the course of the year. If you have a fundraising auction, for instance, when is it held? When do you need the most money? Perhaps that might drive when you have certain events at your school. By understanding the cash flow, you'll have a much better handle on what you can purchase for your teachers in terms of supplies, in terms of new programs. When we look at the terminology regarding finances in school, the first step is looking at your assets and your liabilities. Looking at your accounts receivable. Looking at your income statement to say how much money is coming in and how much money is going out. And then taking a look at your cash flow. As you build your budget for the coming year, you need to look at your anticipated cash flow. When will the money be flowing into your institution? I hope these thoughts help. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to contact me. Because understanding the financial realities and the financial terminology of school operations will help you become a better principal and ultimately will better serve your students and your faculty. I appreciate it and have a good day.